Hello everyone, my name is Brian and welcome back to Barb's Basement. A lot has changed since Barb first trapped me down here, and as some of you may know, when this channel first started I set out to cover every single issue of Star Wars Legacy. With that being said, it's been a little over a year since I covered the last issue, but that's about to change. I'm happy to say the script for issue 10 has been finished, and I'm about to start the editing process on that. I figured this would be a good time to create a big omnibus of all the issues we've already covered, since we have about 33,000 more basement dwellers than we had when we first started. All I ask is that you like the video, as it really does help push these videos out to more people, and my main goal is to spread the messages of the expanded universe. If you have some spare change, feel free to become a channel member, and we have a full list of those perks over on YouTube. Included in this video will be chapters, so you can feel free to jump around to your heart's desire. Star Wars Legacy is set 137 years after the Battle of Yavin, making it the story set furthest in the old expanded universe timeline. So this is a brand new series on our channel that's going to be ongoing, where I'll be covering every single issue of Star Wars Legacy, all the way up to Star Wars Legacy War. The story begins in the immediate aftermath of the Sith Imperial War, which saw Emperor Roan Fel align the Imperial remnant with the One Sith, led by Darth Cade, a weird death cult type Sith sect that was in hiding for decades on Korriban. You'd think that more people would go to check that planet out every once in a while. So the One Sith were this group of dark side force users who worshiped Darth Cade as the embodiment of the dark side's will. So the Sith were united behind one leader. Darth Cade was looking for any excuse to attack the galaxy at large, so when they found out about the Jedi and the Galactic Alliance's efforts to terraform planets that had once been destroyed by the Yuuzhan Vong, they had their perfect scapegoat: sabotaging the Jedi's efforts to help the people of the galaxy. He managed to successfully turn the galaxy's view of the Jedi on its head, giving the Empire and the One Sith the perfect scapegoat to ignite a war. The story kicks off in the middle of yet another Jedicide. The Galactic Alliance has officially lost the war, and Darth Nihil and the One Sith have trapped Jedi Master Cole Skywalker and the Jedi Order on Ossus. Up until this point in the war, the One Sith were gaslighting the entire galaxy and making them think that they weren't like Darth Vader and Darth Sidious. They weren't your grandpappy's Darksiders. But Sith gotta do what the Sith gotta do. Sith start killing Jedi, Jedi start killing Sith. Darth Nihil proclaims that Darth Cade will not make the same mistakes that Palpatine made, and that all Jedi must die. Cade Skywalker's master Wolf Sazin is mortally wounded by Darth Nihil. This forces Cade to leap into action to try to help his master. Cole scolds Cade, knowing that if he fights alongside him, he will definitely die. I mean, look how many Sith there are. There are tons. And he knows that he must help save the remaining Padawans. With great reluctance, Cade flees to his ship with Wolf. Cade, in anger, uses a healing ability to bring his master back from the brink of death. A la Rey Skywalker?
Well, that's all a lie. Nope.
Some would say this ability is unnatural, including Wolf, who is totally not about it. After Cole Skywalker is killed by Darth Nihil's jazz hands, Cade hops to an X-Wing determined to kill as many Sith as he possibly can. He promptly fakes his death and bails, with his master citing that he would have sensed his Padawan's death in the Force, because when Cade brought him back from death, it increased their Force bond with one another. With Cole Skywalker dead, the Jedi Order scattered, Cade Skywalker faking his own death, and the Galactic Alliance all but destroyed, Roan Fel is able to lay claim to the title of Emperor of the Galaxy. That's at least until Darth Cade rolls in with his posse, they kill Roan Fel and his Imperial Knights. But the time for celebration is cut short when Darth Cade reveals that it's actually a body double of Roan Fel, causing him to get very spicy with Darth Maladi. But Cade isn't the only one that's spicy, because Moff Morlish Veed is also upset that Darth Cade, a literal Sith Lord, went back on his promise of handing him all of the power in the galaxy. It's as if this man has never seen Star Wars before. After Cade does a few murders, he tells Darth Warlock, his most trusted confidant, that his body is failing him, and that he's at risk of this mysterious illness consuming his body. Despite this, he must still appear like a big, strong, powerful boy, since not all of the Moffs are super pleased with this really aggressive Sith takeover of the government. Warlock notes that Cade is iron-willed, but he should go back into some form of healing trance or stasis. Unluckily for our protagonist back on Ossus, Cade has just tapped into the dark side keg and healed his master, revealing his powers to the new Emperor. Cade can sense through the Force that this was clearly a Jedi, but he has no idea that it's a Jedi from the most famous family in the entire galaxy, a Skywalker. Cade proclaims that his vision is not yet a reality, but with a little bit of elbow grease and good old-fashioned murder, the One Sith will solidify their power grab. Thus concludes the first issue of Star Wars Legacy. If it isn't obvious, this is my absolute favorite era of Star Wars. I think that it doesn't get enough credit for the things that it brings to the expanded universe. It drops you right into the middle of the action the same way A New Hope does. You get to see the progression of Luke's Jedi Order and the ways that it differs from the Jedi of the Old Republic. And I think that the Sith in this series are really fascinating, and trust me, they only get more insane as the story progresses. Some really dark shit goes down in this series. I think that one of the best parts about this series is that it ties in so many different eras of the Star Wars expanding universe. So, our story picks back up 7 years after the massacre of Ossus, and the end of the Sith Imperial War. A handful of the remaining Jedi are meeting on a secret planet designed to scare droids, I guess? Wolf saves and approaches 3 hooded Jedi, with one of them remarking that it is dangerous for more than one Jedi to be anywhere at the same time, and that the Sith and bounty hunters are tracking down the survivors. With it being so dangerous, the 3 Jedi are wondering why Wolf would have risked this meeting. Shadow, who was on the ship when Cade healed Wolf and promptly got blown up in space, realizes why Wolf risked the meeting. He's still convinced that Cade is alive and well, sensing him out there in the Force somewhere. The others don't buy it, not believing that a Skywalker would abandon the galaxy altogether, so he must be dead. Wolf reasserts that Cade must be alive since their Force bond is so strong. Shadow, Wolf's former apprentice, laments that if Cade was still alive, he clearly doesn't want to be found. What I think is really interesting about these first 2 pages is that Wolf remarks that Shadow became his Padawan after Cade went missing, meaning that the Jedi of this era were still actively trying to further their ranks after a Jedi purge, unlike the Jedi after Order 66, who were for the most part easily discovered and stopped by Darth Vader. But I guess that's what happens when you have a person that has a singular focus on hunting down and murdering everybody. Wolf tells the gathering of the Jedi that he believes that only a Skywalker can rally the Jedi against the Sith, and that he doesn't believe that they should do anything until Cade is found. Before anyone can argue, a Sith throws a javelin at one of them. Out of all of the things in the Star Wars universe, a javelin. The remaining Jedi who weren't speared to death leap into action fighting off these crab-looking Sith. Wolf and Shadow are able to put the remaining Sith down, but they're the only 2 to survive. Shadow decides that he would rather join Wolf on his search for Cade, noting that the Sith won't stop hunting them down and that he would rather be the hunter for a little while. Wolf remarks that he trusts the Force will lead them to Cade. Thade Talak in the Outer Rim. The place. Broger's, a seedy safe house where the people are ugly and they eat snails. Literal snails. A place where those on the run can find a hideout if they have the coin. Skriger, possibly one of the ugliest beings I've ever seen in Star Wars, is running from a pirate named Rav. Like all other bounties in the galaxy, he swears up and down that it's a misunderstanding, with one of the least trustworthy lies I've ever read. He just needs some time and distance. It's not you, it's me. Despite this, he is reassured passage off-world. Across the bar, we see a Jedi on the run, Hosk, trying to secure passage as well. His contact tells him not to be caught, and that if he is, forget that he ever knew him. Enter Delilah Blue, a stereotypical space babe written like she's straight out of the Men Writing Women subreddit. Despite the nature of this hideout, she is looking for Skriger. She manages to sexy her way into the hideout, gross, but all of that seduction is for nothing when Cade just kicks the door in, with full-on Hot Topic mascara on to boot. He for some reason feels the need to run down the crew, that way he knows that everybody in the bar is fully aware of the transgressions that he is committing. We have Jariah Sin, Delilah Blue, and Cade, last name redacted. Hosk, thinking that they are there for him, panics and uses the Force to throw a glass at the crew. Even though, you know, the Jedi are illegal, he still uses the Force. Skriger is loving it. Jariah is real hot for the credits they can get from a Jedi, but Cade is focused on Skriger. While Skriger is turning to run, Cade gobs him right in the back of his head. Jariah is still going for Hosk as the bar erupts into chaos. Jariah, not willing to risk one-on-one combat, just aims to kill. This is one of the first times that we see Cade still has a little Jedi left in him, despite how much he's been through. He sees that Sin is about to blast Hosk, so to stop the rogue Jedi from dying, he launches Skriger at his buddy to stop him. Hosk gives a little smirk, sensing that the bounty hunter is Force sensitive. Before he can make his escape, Delilah hits him with a sleep dart, directly in the face. But Hosk isn't going to go quietly into the night, as he easily Force pushes Delilah, while Sin chucks a thud bug at him, launching him across the room. Sin and Cade get into a little bit of a tiff about how Cade hit him with Skriger. This is one of the first instances that we see Star Wars no-no words, which I think is pretty funny. Frackin'. Broger, the owner of the establishment, rolls in with some of the most insane-looking droids I've ever seen in Star Wars. I absolutely love the character design in this series. I just think that every single character and every single robot and ship, they just really pop out of the page at you. So this is where we learned that the gang's boss was once just a petty pirate, but now he's some kind of pirate warlord. So Cade successfully uses this to leverage Broger into allowing them to take the rogue Jedi and Skriger. despite the Cantina's rules against aggression. As an added bonus, they won't tell the Empire that Broger was hiding a Jedi from the Sith, which is like the ultimate sin in the galaxy right now. Now back in their land speeder, Cade asks Sin why he was going to kill the Jedi. This is where we first discover that Sin doesn't trust Jedi because they're able to use the Force and influence people to do things against their will, which is on one hand totally understandable, and on the other, I mean, like, come on man, it's a little racist. Skrieger desperately tries to get Cade to let him go, but it obviously isn't going to work. Hosk sadly tries to convince the gang to let him go, saying that the Jedi were once peacekeepers and a force for good in the galaxy. Sin, mocking the Jedi, asks why he didn't use his lightsaber to stop him. Hosk was apparently never much of a fighter and more of a healer. The Jedi continues to plead. There's a reason why the Sith want Jedi alive. Even though Cade's whole life is ruined by the Sith, he feigns indifference. Since obviously Sin hates the Jedi, he doesn't want them to find out that he actually is one himself. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, the former Jedi Temple has been taken over by the One Sith and is being used as their new training facility. Way to throw salt in the wound there. For all intents and purposes, this is Crate's seat of power. Here, we're introduced to a fan-favorite character in a scantily clad Twi'lek, Talon. So apparently George Lucas loved this character so much that he actually wanted her included in the Star Wars Darth Maul game that was cancelled a few years back. I wonder why he liked her so much. Her training with Darth Roan is now complete. Roan admits that she's one of the best that he has ever trained. Surely a man of his teaching ability, Crate will want to keep him around. And he's dead. This is where we see just how indoctrinated the Sith are into this weird cult. Crate has forced it into their brain that literally any command that he gives, they must obey, because he is the Emperor. Even to the point where Talon was raised by Darth Roan, and she is so ready and willing to kill him. Crate dubs this new apprentice Darth Talon, and declares that his life is hers, and so is her death. Some real Kool-Aid shit happening here. Sensing her ability in the Force, he quickly promotes her to the rank of Hand, the same rank that Mara Jade held for Palpatine. So over the last 7 years since the war ended, Fel's empire didn't just magically go away. Since he was able to make it out, he's been using guerrilla tactics against the One Sith. His daughter, and heir to the Empire, Marasiah Fel, has been secretly meeting with Imperial officers to sway them back into the loving arms of her father. And obviously people wouldn't be willing to abandon the Fel dynasty this quickly, because clearly Fel's a lot more benevolent than the Sith ever could be. Cut to Sakaro. Talon is hunting down the princess and encounters Imperial Knights Elka Vetter. The Imperial Knights are seriously one of my favorite parts about the Legacy era. There's just so much cool potential there for gray Imperial Force users. And there's a lot of really cool fan theories floating around out there about them. And that's for sure a video for another time. Unfortunately, Vetter was never really much of a match for Talon, and she gets looped and loses her hand. Vetter believes that she was successful in helping the princess escape with Astral Veo. God damn, that name is so hard to say. Astral Veo. Yeah, that's right. The sister of Shadow Veo. God damn. But it was all part of Talon's plan, hoping that the princess will run back to her father, revealing his secret location. Talon, after revealing this, gives her the good old-fashioned lightning hands, killing her instantly. Marasiah feels Vetter die in the Force, falling to her knees. So this is one of the things that I find really interesting about the Fels, and something that I think a lot of the Expanded Universe fans really like about this dynasty. So somewhere along this bloodline, Jagged Fel's descendants were able to become Force sensitive, and they're all trained from birth to be Imperial Knights. So the common belief is that Jagged Fel and Jaina Solo got married and at some point had children. So if you think about it, the Fels are like long-lost distant cousins to the Skywalkers. And it's just a really interesting thought to think that a Skywalker would at some point become the Emperor. Marasiah insists that she must avenge Vetter. She wasn't just her bodyguard, but she was also her friend and teacher. Veo is able to convince the princess that her master gave her life so that they could escape, and that they are bound by their service to others. As the princess's father always says, what duty requires. They flee, potentially falling into Talon's trap. So, thus concludes Legacy issue number 2. So we're introduced to a lot of the key players in Legacy in this issue. We get to see a lot more of the Imperial Knights, we see what's happened to Cade Skywalker, we see the state of the Jedi Order, and we see that Crate's Sith Empire isn't quite as solid as other empires in the past. While I love the history of Darth Crate and the story that they tell about him in Legacy, he is a bit of a dunce. The way that I like to describe him to friends who might be interested in Legacy is just think if Darth Maul were to become Emperor. All Sith Lords have a bit of delusion of grandeur, but I like to think that if Darth Maul were to become Emperor, he would still be this rabid animal who's been caged and abused his whole life. And I like to think of Crate in that same way. I don't think that he's intelligent as Palpatine was. But the issue with him is that he views himself as being really, really hyper intelligent, and nobody is ever going to have a plan as grand as his. But I think it's how that old saying goes, never underestimate large gatherings of stupid people or something along those lines. This era of Star Wars is a lot more Game of Thrones. There's a lot of different parties involved, there's a lot of different mechanics happening in the background that you're not quite seeing. Right now we're introduced to the Fel Empire, we have Cade's Empire, we have the former Galactic Alliance, we have the Jedi Order, and then the One Sith are also kind of their own thing separate from the Empire. So you have all these different people vying for power in the galaxy. And it only gets more bloody from here, because those that have power, their greatest fear is losing it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this issue of Legacy. I know that Legacy can be a little bit campy and people have different opinions on it, but the campiness and the over-the-top sci-fi fantasy aspect is what I love about it, and it only becomes more science fiction fantasy the further it goes along. So this week we pick up with issue number 3. Also on Sicario, the Crimson Axe is floating above the Keeley Wasteland, above an ancient Sarlacc pit. Here we learn a little bit more about the deadly pirate Rav. Now he runs a more legal operation providing bail bonds, and bounty hunters stop by his station to drop off and pick up assignments. Think Dryden Voss and his ship the First Light, or the Bounty Hunters Guild that hangs out in Navarro. Hosk is able to get the upper hand and takes off on foot. Sin, with his deep phobia of Jedi, shouts at Cade telling him to just shoot the Jedi and that it's not worth having the Jedi kill him. Hosk, in desperation, leaps into the water below, with Cade hot on his tail. Cade manages to get a hold of him, and as they descend into the water, Cade tells him just to give up, because if he's dead, then he truly has no hope at all. But Hosk can feel the Force burning in Cade, successfully guessing that he is possibly a Jedi himself. So Cade, in anger, gives him a good old haymaker, knocking him unconscious. As he drags the Jedi's limp body ashore, Rav is already waiting. Cade is thirsty for his bonus pay for the Jedi. Skrieger tries to convince Rav that he helped capture the Jedi, which I guess he isn't wrong, his body did literally get thrown into the Jedi, but Rav isn't buying it. This is where we get a glimpse into how dark Cade's world has actually become. Rav is clearly running a pyramid scheme style operation here. He keeps the crew in so much debt that they have no choice but to keep working for him. Even worse than that, he fuels Cade's death stick addiction. Even though Cade says he can't afford his fix, Rav just puts it on his tab. Sin is red hot at this point, upset that after all of this work and the toll the job takes on his body, Cade would be willing to hit himself up with these death sticks to boot. Like all addicts, Cade deflects to Sin, telling him that it's his life, and that if Sin wants to, he is more than welcome to find another ship with another captain. Some really dark subject matter in this issue. Rav, seeing Sin's frustration, he tries to recruit him back to his crew. Sin, scoffing at the idea of going back to work for Rav, calls him out for taking advantage of Cade's bad habits just to keep him on a tight leash. Rav boasts that he likes having him on a tight leash, and that them owing him reminds him of the good old days when they were all space pirates. Sin objects, those were Rav's good old days. Cade and Sin earned their freedom, and now Rav owes them. Rav, getting close enough to smell what Sin had for dinner, tells him that he doesn't owe him anything. He owed Sin's father. And besides, Sin is the one that convinced him to pull Cade out of all that wreckage. All of his debts have been paid. As Rav walks away, Sin and Delilah remark that Rav isn't wrong. Cade has only got worse over the years. He's lost his edge. And he isn't what he used to be, but it's not his fault. Something in him is just broken. So already this is one of the darkest stories in Star Wars. Not because it has planets being blown up or tales of fatherly abandonment, but because it tells a personal story of loss and addiction and PTSD, something that is rarely if ever touched on in Star Wars. Wipe to Bastion, the Imperial remnant homeworld and the former capital world of the Empire before the Sith moved it to Coruscant. As Roan Fel's ship lands, we see hundreds if not thousands of stormtroopers lined up and at the ready. As Roan Fel and his knights descend the ramp, Lieutenant Kiefer informs them that the true Emperor has instructed him to arrest Roan Fel on sight, and that he must surrender. Roan obviously isn't about that life, and informs the lieutenant that he isn't here to surrender. He is here on Bastion to reclaim his throne. Roan proclaims that he is by birthright the Emperor, and that the Sith are the usurpers and their allegiance is to him. He calls upon the stormtroopers of Bastion to join him and to help him reclaim the true empire that they faithfully served. As the stormtroopers bow before their true emperor, dumb idiot Lieutenant Kiefer protests, saying that the stormtroopers' loyalty is to the throne, not just the man that sits on it. Clearly not being able to read the room, he aims to kill Roan. he is quickly blasted by, one of the several thousand loyal stormtroopers. With the now dead lieutenant's body still warm, General Oren Yeager of the 501st welcomes the true Emperor home. The 501st, it's the regiment that killed all the Jedi children in Revenge of the Sith. Do you get it? Here we are introduced to Antares Draco, one of my favorite characters in this entire time period. Think of him as like the captain of the Kingsguard, just with less limb loss and incest. Roan asks the general if the other troopers have been able to make it home yet. Turns out there's a lot more troops loyal to the Fel dynasty than the one Sith thought. Yeager reveals that several regiments are being rotated back to Bastion, and that the 501st always remain loyal to the throne. Up until this point, the Fel Empire has really only been able to mount hit-and-run attacks against the Sith Empire. The younger officers like Kiefer have all been brought up to be brainwashed by the Sith Empire, and time is no longer on the Fel dynasty's side. But from the heavily fortified homeworld of Bastion, the Fel Empire will be able to mount a more powerful defense against the Usurper Empire. So here's where we see the most definitive splintering of the Sith and Fel empires. The Imperial Civil War is starting, and the battle lines are being drawn. War is looming. With this bold move, Krayt will now know where to find Fel. Imperial Knight Draco warns Fel that Krayt will now be on the attack, but Fel's not worried about it. Bastion is the most heavily armed military base in the galaxy, and it would cause so much damage that both military forces would never be able to keep up order in the galaxy. But, luckily for them, they still have the element of surprise, and Krayt is still unaware that they have taken Bastion in this moment. The longer they can keep this secret, the stronger their hold over the Empire will become. Before the Emperor is able to settle back into the Imperial Palace, General Yeager informs Draco and Fel that their contacts in Sakaro have sent a message to Bastion. The Imperial mission on the planet is burning, and the princess is missing. Her master El Covetter has been found dead. Draco is quick to action. He can have 3 knights ready to leave the planet in 10 minutes. Shockingly, Fel sternly forbids it. Draco says that he can't just leave the princess to die. Fel sees right through the Sith plan. Krayt is using Marasiah as bait to lure the Fel Empire, and more importantly, the Emperor out of hiding. Their military might is not strong enough yet to reveal that they have taken Bastion. Even though it isn't easy for Roan to forbid the knights from saving his daughter, he still gives the orders. And Draco's real grumpy about it. Back on Sakara, Marasiah and Astral are catching their breath as they run away from Talon. Astral used a holocom and sent a prearranged signal to have her brother Shadow meet them on Vendaxa. Talon is quick on their trail. Her plan is seemingly working out perfectly. Elsewhere in Sakaro, Sin and Delilah are outside the Minok, yelling at Cade to let them in. They live there too. Delilah remarks that Cade technically owns the Minok, so he doesn't really have to let them in. Sin angrily says that doesn't make it fair. Equal shares was the deal they had worked out. Inside the Minok, we see that Cade is ignoring his angry friends, with his death sticks strewn out in front of him. As he lovingly stares into one of his death sticks, the room lights up blue, with the presence of a Force Ghost. None other than Luke Skywalker's Force Ghost, with full 70s haircut and all. Luke asks why Cade is doing this to himself, not understanding why he's using death sticks. In all these panels, we really see how rundown Cade really is. He looks really gangly and gaunt and borderline ill, showing just how much his traumatic past has taken a toll on him mentally. It turns out there's a reason why Cade started doing death sticks in the first place. They keep the literal ghost of his past away, and they deaden his connection to the Force. And for Cade, this is more of a benefit than a deterrent. Luke is disgusted that Cade has fallen so far and allowed himself and his friends to turn in a fellow Jedi. Something that Cade had never done before. Cade argues and says he's no longer a Jedi or a Skywalker. Those titles died with him on Ossus. Luke is unable to comprehend why Cade is the way that he is. He has so much natural talent and raw power. He was able to bring his master back from death's door, a very unique ability for a Jedi. But for Cade, he was never really the same after he saved Wolf, saying that using this ability was cold and dark, and even worse, he liked it. He craved the power that it gave him. Knowing his family has a history with the dark side, he knows this isn't a good state of mind for a Skywalker to be in. But of course, Luke knows all about the dark side, having fallen to the dark side himself to defeat the reborn Palpatine from the inside. He knows that Cade wouldn't have to use the dark side to heal if he would just complete his training and accept his legacy as a Skywalker and a Jedi. Here, Cade struggles with something that I think that Ben Solo / Kylo Ren was supposed to grapple with in the sequel trilogy. The difficulty of dealing with a complicated family legacy and living up to either the good or the bad actions of his ancestors. Because believe it or not, it's gotta be a lot of pressure on a kid to try and live up to the family name of Luke Skywalker or Anakin Skywalker. You have on one hand the man that single-handedly defeated the Empire, and on the other hand you have Anakin Skywalker, a guy who literally murdered children. In anger, he asks Luke what being a Jedi ever did for his father Cole, or hell, what it even did for Luke's father Anakin. Why would he want to be a Jedi when the galaxy always turns on the Peacekeepers just to beg them for help whenever they make a mistake? But Luke isn't having any of it. dismissing Cade's opinion, noting that he lived through those histories that Cade has read about, and he knows the cost of doing the right thing. Every generation has their struggles, and running away from his responsibilities as a Jedi and a Skywalker won't make those problems go away. Cade, in the heat of an argument, pulls out his blaster. Luke is obviously unthreatened by it since, he's a Force ghost and whatnot. But then, in possibly one of the darkest moments in this series, Cade threatens suicide to get Luke to go away. Luke leaves, but gives the old whippersnapper a little bit of wisdom before he goes. He has a destiny, and no matter how far he runs, destiny will find him the same way it found Luke. Cade collapses, blaster in hand, with his death stick scattered all around him. He is at his absolute lowest point. Turns out that destiny finds him a lot sooner than he probably thought, as he finally allows Delilah and Sin back on board, pretending that he was just taking a nice hot shower. They are shouting in the distance. It is none other than Princess Marasiah and Astral Veo. Get an easier to pronounce name. Cade tells the gang to wait on board and that he'll deal with it. The princess tells Cade they need passage off-world, and that he will be handsomely rewarded once they arrive safely. Cade, being the shrewd businessman that he is, demands credits up front, and in a brief moment of levity, Marasiah tries to use a mind trick on Cade. Cade, obviously being a Jedi, is unaffected by her attempt. Before either can discuss Cade's obvious Force connection, they both sense the Sith Lord Darth Talon. Suddenly, Cade's memories of Ossus re-emerge in a moment of PTSD. Cade, understanding the very real threat that's heading their way, rushes the pair on board as quickly as possible. Back on board, the crew is settling down for the evening, but Cade comes rushing in with his new friends, screaming at them to start an emergency takeoff. But they don't wanna, because they're busy eating caterpillars or something. Talon rolls up just as they're taking off. Unknown to them, Talon already knows their destination, Vendaxa. Once the crew is safely off-world, Cade shows Marasiah and Astral where they're gonna bunk for the trip. Astral tells Cade they must get to Vendaxa as quickly as possible. Marasiah, understandably not trusting the bounty hunters, tells them she will reveal their destination once they're on the planet. Delilah is very cross with Cade. They are now on the run with 2 Imperial missionaries, and the Sith are hot on their trail, and worst of all, they have no money. Delilah is very grumpy about them staying in her room with her clothes. Women, am I right, fellas? Jesus Christ, so weird this fucking lady is written. Delilah is trying to bone down Cade, but he is just so edgy and cool that he doesn't care. Pfft, what does he care? He's got so many girlfriends. She doesn't even fucking matter, bro. Cade tells the gang that the human tried to use a mind trick on him, and that her attitude and arrogance lead him to believe that she is actually an Imperial Knight. And since the Knights are also on the run from the Sith because they're loyal to the Fel dynasty, she could catch a high price. Cade, hopping onto the interwebs, finds out the true identity of his passenger, Princess Marasiah Fel. She will surely fetch a high price. Here, Cade cracks the Sith's master plan. The princess is going to run back to her father, which will reveal Fel's location to the Sith. Her father has the largest bounty in the galaxy on his head, so Cade forms a new plan. To return the princess back to her father, get paid from the Fel Empire, and then rat them all out to the Sith Empire. It's a sure thing, and they will make so many sacks they will never have to work for Rav again. They can't lose. Seems ominous. Thus concludes issue number 3 of Star Wars Legacy. We finally get to meet the Dread Pirate Rav, and sadly we see that Cade fully turns his back on the Jedi Order, handing in Hosk. The galaxy grows more divided. Now the Empire is on the brink of civil war, not to mention what little forces remain of the Galactic Alliance. I have to say the characterization of Luke is a little odd in this issue, having him speak like your grandpa telling you that he used to walk up hills both ways to the Jedi Praxium. It is still really dope to see Cade, a product of Luke's new Jedi Order, and the man himself interact. We get a very depressing glimpse into Cade's life, how far he's fallen and how he really only cares about himself at this point. And like I mentioned before, the art in this issue is just really striking. They really hammer home just how dirty and grimy Cade's life has become, and just what the massacre on Ossus really did to his psyche. However, Luke is right, Destiny is on a collision course with Cade and his crew. Well, that about wraps it up for this week, but hold on to your butts, things only get more intense from here. So this week we pick back up with issue number 4, and frankly, one of my favorites of the entire series. This issue opens up on Korriban, the ancient homeworld and graveyard of the Sith. Darth Krayt, the leader of the one Sith and the current Emperor, is outside of a tomb, reciting the creed of the Sith. Peace is a lie, there is only passion, through passion I gain strength, through strength I gain power, through power I gain victory, through victory my chains are broken. Look, we've all joined a cult at some point, we get it. Krayt is using the Force to access 3 ancient holocrons, asking the Sith who have come before him to bestow him with dark knowledge. He is opening his mind to their secrets of power. In the darkness, 3 incorporeal figures form, revealing the gatekeepers of the holocrons. Darth Endedu, Lord Nihilus, and the bad boy himself, Darth Bane. Krayt is trying to impose his will onto these mighty Sith, and it is clear from the start they absolutely do not like him, with Bane calling him a would-be Sith, Ouch. Cade and his rabble are directly defiling his Sith Order and the order that brought about Darth Sidious and Sith domination. A quick side note, it is awesome to see Bane in his Orbalisk armor. I mean, look at him. Cool. Anyways, back to the main note. Cade argues that he has improved on the rule of 2 by making the Sith one. Cade argues that he recreated the Sith just like Bane did when he tricked all the Sith into committing forced bubble suicide. Cade has seized power and given it a purpose. What would his power be without a purpose? Bane disagrees, stating that power is its own purpose, just like Revan taught him in the past. And to share his power with lesser Sith is to dilute it. His order will fold on itself, and they will turn on him, just like the Sith did in the past. Darth Vectivus chimes in, calling Cade an outright heretic. He has only come seeking the knowledge because his body is failing him. This mysterious sickness is consuming him. Here Cade appeals to Bane, saying that Bane was able to master the Orbalisk armor that attached to his body, and Vectivus was able to use the Force to extend his lifespan well after his body died. Lord Nihilus escaped his death by containing his essence in his armor or something. Cade wants to know how they were all able to achieve this, and Vectivus, mocking the Dark Lord, casts a grim vision on him. His body is quickly consumed by the Vong spawn that are plaguing his body, turning him into a mangled, spiny monster straight out of a Lovecraft story. Cade defies this vision, proclaiming that he takes what he desires. He is the living Lord of the Sith. This is not his truth, and he will not succumb to this Vong disease. In this act of defiance, he tells the great Sith of old that if they will not serve him, they can go fuck themselves. I was actually surprised by that sentence. He will find other teachings. He will find another way to cure himself. This is one of the most famous sequences from this series. It showcases just how different all the schools of Sith philosophy are. Bane led one of the most powerful Sith of all time to take over the galaxy through the rule of 2, and Vectivus was able to outwit all of his enemies and destroy his would-be betrayers, preserving his spirit for a millennia. And Nihilus ate some planets and spoke some gibberish or something. Across the galaxy on Vendaxa, Cade and the crew are fleeing from something. Sin asked Cade if he could have landed the Mynock further away from the crash site, but Cade just did his best since Vendaxa is mostly covered in dense jungle. Sin, being the exposition outlet of this panel, asks the crew why they are even here to begin with. Estrella informs the gang that this crash site is where her parents had crashed when they were very young. Her and her twin brother Shadow were the only 2 survivors. Since there were no monsters there when they were both young, they thought it would be a safe space to meet if they ever needed to meet in secrecy. At this point, Cade is actually unaware that her twin brother is in fact his childhood friend Shadow. He believes that her brother is just another Imperial missionary. Then boom, an accolade pops out. Estrella is swiped by the accolade, but before it can launch, Shadow and Master Wolf Sazin spring into action. Sin, ever the racist, immediately calls the Jedi a Slimo. Come on, Sin, it's 137 ABY. Be better than this. Delilah, continuing to be a massive dipshit, says there are only 2 Jedi and there's 3 of them. She likes these odds.
Bitch, are you for real?
The Jedi team up to take down the accolade because, well, they're Jedi. Sin is in shock and asks Delilah if she's been hitting that pipe if she ever thought they could take them. Once Shadow and Wolf dispatch of the Alclay, they greet Marasiah and Estrella. Shadow, seeing the grimy and dirty crew of the Mynock, questions the company that his sister is keeping. Marasiah is no dummy, and she uses this moment to reveal that she knew the whole time the crew had probably deduced her true identity, and their darker intentions. However, once they are clear of the bounty hunters, she will have the Empire wire a huge sum of credits to whatever account they wish. Cade, recognizing his former best friend and master, has a pure oh shit moment. He tells Delilah and Sin that they are cutting their losses, and he tries to leave as quickly as possible. Sin is flabbergasted that Cade would let the princess take advantage of them like this. Both Shadow and Wolf quickly realize that this is their Cade, the living son of Cole Skywalker and the descendant of Luke, the one they thought died in that fiery crash all those years ago. Cade is still trying to hide his former Jedi identity from his crew, asking the Jedi if they have a problem. Wolf realizes how delicate of a situation Cade must be in, and simply responds with, no. It is a very dangerous time to be a Jedi in the galaxy. Wolf is quick to diffuse the tension and tries to hurry the princess along, but boom, the Jedi shuttle explodes. Marasiah, just having told off the gang, is served a heaping slice of humble pie. The price for passage has now doubled. Marasiah and Wolf both feel the dark presence of Darth Talon approaching. Sin remarks that he doesn't feel anything. What an idiot. Talon springs from the foliage with the beasts of the jungle, launching her surprise attack. Shadow and Wolf quickly go on the defensive, telling the princess and Estrella to flee. Cade explains to Delilah that the beasts are being influenced by the Force to attack the crew. Talon engages in a duel with the 2 Jedi as Sin rightfully calls out Cade for thinking that all of this was even remotely a good idea. I mean, come on, the whole thing was gonna go tits up from the start. Silhouetted by the night's moon, Talon delivers some exposition, and quickly gives away her more than likely very top secret title. She is Cade's hand, and she is the Jedi's death. Talon gets the upper hand by force pushing Shadow into a bluff. She then singles out Wolf, telling the Jedi that Darth Nihil marked him by taking his hand, but Talon will take more than just his other hand. She will take his life. Marasiah, seeing that the Jedi are in dire straits, pulls a saber to try and protect the one-handed master from Talon's barrage of lightning, telling Talon that she won't let another person who came to her defense die in her name. She felt her master die in the Force, and she isn't about to let Wolf do the same. Talon can feel the Force in the princess, but she knows that Marasiah is no match for her. Her training was not yet complete, and she just uses the Force to check her. Oh. Talon still doesn't want the princess dead. She simply wants her to run back to her father. Here we have a pivotal moment in Cade's journey. His former master tells him to take Marasiah in to run, a direct mirror of the massacre of Ossus. The last time they were in this situation, everything that Cade ever knew or loved was taken from him, including his father. In typical Cade fashion, he chooses his own path. Despite Delilah telling him to cut their losses, he chooses action, unloading his double-barreled blaster at the Sith Lord. Delilah and Sin reluctantly join him by blasting at Talon, and she quickly uses the Force to disarm the entire crew. Talon is going in for the kill, saber drawn and ready for murder. And in a final act of desperation, Cade finally uses his natural gift of the Force and hurls debris at the oncoming Sith, and then uses the Force to bring his blaster back to his hand. All except the two Jedi who already knew Cade's identity look on in awe in Cade's ability in the Force. Surely this is going to have repercussions on Sin and Cade's relationship. Dissolve back to the Mynock! Sin tells the crew that the Sith damaged a lot of the Mynock systems. I think it's actually really hard to tell what this sentence means. It is going to take a lot of repairs to get the Mynock back into flying shape. Sin questions why the Sith didn't just blow their ship up like he did with the Jedi shuttle. Estrella, eager to help, tells her crew that she can work on the comm system. She has experience in IT, working with the Imperial mission. Shadow and Wolf can sense the Sith is still out there somewhere, stalking and hunting them, but Shadow wants to turn the hunt on her. Wolf tells the young Jedi Knight to hold out. The Sith will reveal herself soon enough, and they need to stay alert. Back in the Mynock, Estrella is using the ship's comms to reach out to Moff Conrad Russ, her superior officer in the Imperial mission. The Imperial mission is basically a religion that isn't really a religion. They would send out missionaries to non-Imperial worlds to try and improve the relationships, to prove to various worlds that they were no longer the Empire of old. This was all part of Fel's Victory Without War initiative, sending support to planets that had suffered at the hands of the Yuuzhan Vong decades earlier. This stood in stark contrast to the Jedi and the Galactic Alliance's Ossus project, that brought the Vong back into the galactic fold, trying to improve the Vong's image, therefore allowing them to integrate into the larger galaxy. Shadow, being a direct victim of the Empire that turned on Fel and his Imperial mission, isn't sure Estrella should trust a Moff. She reassures her brother that this Moff embodies the ideals of the former Empire, and everything that she has dedicated her life to. Estrella has a connection to the Force, and she could have joined the Jedi Order when her brother did. She could have been trained to be a knight. But the mission is where she belongs, just like the Jedi is where Shadow belongs. She has a sense of debt to the mission, since they took the two orphans in when their parents died in that crash. When her brother left for the Jedi, it tore her apart, but she grew to understand that Shadow's calling was to be a Jedi Knight. Shadow understands that his sister is everything the Imperial mission claims to be. If she trusts this Moff, he will accept her judgment. Flickering to life, the figure of the Moff appears. The first thing he asks is her location. Already a red flag. She runs down the situation, telling the Moff their location, the Jedi, and the attack from the Sith. For the time being, the Sith has been repelled, and they are working double time to make sure the Mynock gets repaired. The Moff is taken aback by the presence of Jedi Knights. He tells Estrella that he will contact the Rightful Emperor. Marasiah won't be safe until she is back with her father. He tells the missionary to stay on Vendaxa until they hear from Fel, or he contacts them again. Turns out Estrella probably shouldn't have trusted the Moff. Cade was there, listening in on their conversation. Cade admits that he thought that the Imperial mission was a waste of the Imperial budget, but he is impressed by the Moff's adaptability. Russ remarks that one must change with the times. The mission has always served the Emperor, and if the Emperor changes, it just means finding new ways to serve. Cade knows that if Fel does come for his daughter, he won't come alone, and he will more than likely bring his Imperial Knights. Russ, more than likely knowing Fel very well, asks what if he doesn't come for his daughter. Cade is a patient man. He knows that eventually she will either find her way back to her father, or they will capture her, enlightening the shit out of her until she confesses where her father is. Russ hopes that they can avoid using torture as a method of extraction. He will contact Emperor Fel and inform him that his daughter is in direct danger. He has back channels. Fel will get the message. Cade can trust him, and he does. Russ lives to serve. Thus concludes issue number 4 of Star Wars Legacy. Like I said at the start of the issue, this is by far one of my favorite of the entire series. We get to see just how vulnerable Cade actually is, and we get to see 3 of the most powerful Sith Lords to ever live. And I actually love that they all hate Cade for various different reasons, and since they hate him so much and they're not willing to help him out in any way, shape, or form, Cade is becoming more and more extreme the longer it takes for him to find a cure for the Vong spawn. It's a real ticking clock situation here. Cade finally gives in and uses the power that he was blessed with to help out not only himself, but the people that he cares about. He uses the Force to save his old family and his new family. He may be a total dickhead, but he isn't heartless. He didn't want to fail his master this time. Things get even spicier with the Imperial Civil War. Cade, a lot like fascist dictators, is using the Imperial mission, once a force for good, as a tool to hunt down his enemies. Soon, Darth Nihil will be on the hunt for the false Emperor and the Jedi he failed to kill on Ossus. Soon, Cade will clash with the Sith that killed his father, ruining his life. So that brings us here to issue number 6. We open on Bastion, the Empire's homeworld, before Cade moved it back to Coruscant once the Sith Imperial War was won. In the Imperial Castle, Roan already knows what the plan is. Cade has laid out the trap and he will not fall for it. He refuses to authorize a rescue mission. Imperial Knight Draco disagrees, and he is baffled that the Emperor refuses to save his own daughter from certain torture and, much worse, death. Roan understands the gravity of the situation, and he looks beyond his own desires to save his daughter. The fate of the Empire and the entire galaxy is at stake. Not all the troops loyal to the true Emperor have returned back to Bastion. They cannot allow Cade to become aware of their coup, not yet at least. Draco still argues his point. He would never give out the Emperor's location to the Sith, but Roan is steadfast in his decision and he forbids it. It is his final word. Ganner tries to reason with Draco. He understands how he feels, but their loyalty is to the true Emperor, and the Emperor has spoken. Draco asks Ganner if loyalty is the same thing as obedience. Back on Vendaxa, Darth Talon gets in contact with Darth Nihil. Nihil and his Sith are planetside and they are awaiting her instructions. She tells him to send troops to her position and to do it as covertly as possible. The Jedi still think that she is either dead or injured. She plans to continue hiding in the jungle and to use this confusion to her advantage. Once the Imperials arrive, Nihil's TIE fighters are to shoot down any Imperial shuttles that come to Vendaxa. Then they will all die. Until then, she continues to keep watch over the crew. Back on the Mynock, Wolf still senses the Sith presence out there in the jungle. Cade is unsure. He hit her pretty hard. But after focusing the Force, he senses her as well. Finally, in this moment, Wolf is finally able to speak to his former Padawan in depth. He was right about Cade. He was alive. After all of these years, the Force finally brought them back together. He knew that after all this time, not only was Cade still alive, but he was still a Jedi. Sadly, Cade tells his master that he wasted 7 years of his life. Cade Skywalker died all those years ago on Ossus, and all that was left was a broken and beaten boy that was left in the wreckage of his X-Wing. Wolf argues that the Force is too powerful for Cade to just walk away and give up. With no teaching and no instruction, Cade was able to bring Wolf back from the brink of death. But Cade disagrees. With all of his anger and his hate for the Sith, he walked in the dark side that day, and he wanted nothing more than death and destruction from those that took everything from him. Before the Sith were able to shoot him down, he sealed his flight suit and ejected, left to drift in the stars above the planet where his father and the order he called home were taken from him. He went into a deep meditation to try and save his oxygen levels. He withdrew himself from the Force so that the Sith were not able to locate him. And that's why all the Jedi on board that shuttle that was fleeing Ossus thought that Cade had actually died in the battle. After 3 long days adrift in the vacuum of space, he came to, surrounded by stars. Cade reveals one of his deepest, darkest secrets. When Rav and his pirate crew scooped him up from the void of space, he was able to leverage his way into the crew by helping them scavenge the fallen Jedi temple. He had to watch as the pirates cackled at his father's dead body. All of the mighty Jedi warriors were gone, jokingly asking where their mystical ally the Force was when the temple was sacked. But Cade knew where the Force was. It was with the Sith. Wolf disagrees. The Force is always with any being that can use it, but it's how that being uses it that defines them. He knows that deep down Cade knows this, and he can no longer run. Ever the contrarian, Cade tells Wolf to watch. He will never pick up a lightsaber again. Cade, eager to escape this conversation, checks in on Delilah to see how the engines are coming along. She tells him that the ship will take off, but she's not sure how long it will stay up in the air. She needs at least another hour or two to truly tune up the ship. Cade jokingly says that he'll politely go and ask the Sith Lord if they can just have a couple hours before she comes back to murder them, while Delilah jokes about how she would prefer to die burning alive in a fiery crash or by lightsaber. Cade, in a very somber and serious moment, asks the crew how they're going to spend their bounty. Delilah, knowing the situation, tells Cade that he's thinking way too far ahead. They need to escape the Sith before they can actually cash in on their bounty. Cade isn't talking about the bounty on the princess, he's talking about the bounty on his own head for being a runaway Jedi. Delilah is confused. They would never turn him in for being a Jedi. After all, having their own personal Jedi would make it way easier for them to cash in on bounties and to run scams. Cade sees right through Sin, knowing that he has a burning hatred for Jedi, and that he is more than likely devising a plan to turn Cade in as they speak. And Sin doesn't deny it. He does not like Jedi. He still believes that a Jedi can take control of any being and control their mind and make them do whatever they want to do. Maybe Cade could use a mind trick on him. Maybe Cade forced him to pick up those blasters and to fire on the Sith. Cade shouts, "That's not how the Force works."
That's not how the Force works.
Cade has never used the Force on them, but he knows there's no way to change Sin's mind. Cade sat there countless times as Sin told him that he doesn't trust the Jedi unless they're dead. Dead is easier to collect on than alive. It's easier to shoot a Jedi in the back than to face them head on. Yada yada yada. He's heard it all before. As the argument gets heated, Cade asks Sin if he's just waiting for him to turn around to shoot him in the back. And in the heat of the moment, Sin tells him he will blast him right in the face. Before he can ready his blaster, Cade snatches it with the Force, dropping it to the ground. Cade turns around and walks away. Marasiah, having overheard this very heated conversation, tells Cade that he just makes friends wherever he goes. He tells her to shoot it out of her exhaust, which I'm assuming is Star Wars for shove it up your ass. She tells Cade to cool down. She may be the only person in this moment who truly understands her. Cade scoffs. She's of royal blood, a pampered princess. She has no idea what it's like to be him. Woe is him. But they're more alike than he really knows. Astral told her that Cade was actually a Skywalker and a former Jedi. She is a Fel. She has her own legacy to live up to, and she is just as trapped by it as he is. Sometimes she just wishes she could leave it all behind and start a new life on a distant world. Cade tells her that she could. It's a pretty big galaxy out there. But the princess argues that it really isn't that big. Cade and his crew of gross backwater pirates recognized her. She would never truly be free. Marasiah, being very sharp, already knows that the Sith could have taken her at any point and killed her at any time. She knows that their true goal is to lure her father out from his hiding place. She knows that her father probably won't come, and that's okay. There are bigger things at risk. Things beyond just her life. Cade has already tried the whole honor and duty thing. The Jedi were loyal and they serve honorably to the galaxy, and they still let them get killed. Marasiah knows these outside factors may one day kill her as well, but the well-being of the galaxy is more important than anyone's single life, including theirs. She understands Cade, but she is nothing like him. She envies his freedom from all the responsibility, but she isn't walking away from hers. The Empire made the decision to ally themselves with the Sith, and it cost them everything. It is their undying shame, and that responsibility to make it right is solely theirs. At some point, everyone must strike back their fears and make the right choice. In the distance, the screech of two incoming TIE fighters fills the air. Astral shouts, "It's Emperor Roan Fel. He's here to save his daughter." As the TIE fighters swoop in, they are quickly shot out of the sky by two Sith fighters. Marasiah takes off after the descending TIEs, shouting that this isn't right. Cade tells Astral and the crew to hang back. The Imperials have no more love for them than the Sith do. Astral tries to argue, but Cade tells her to listen to the princess. Something isn't right. Ejecting from the fighters, two Imperial Knights leap to the ground below before their shuttles explode. Marasiah shouts out to the two figures, still thinking that one of them may very well be your dad. She screams that it's a trap and they have to flee. Finally revealing herself, Talon springs from the jungle, calling Roan Fel the false emperor. It is time for him and his insurrection to finally die. Draco scoffs at the Sith, calling Cade a usurper and a fool if he thinks that Roan Fel would fall so easily into his trap. Pulling back his hood, he reveals himself to be Master Draco of the Imperial Knights. The true Emperor saw through this clumsy trap, and he's more powerful than they will ever know. Taunting the oncoming Sith, he tells them to flee while they still have a fighting chance. Darth Talon and Nihil are ready for combat. She tells them that their master's patience is exhausted. She instructs her fellow Sith to take the princess to Darth Krayt. He will get the location of her father by force, and to kill the rest and leave them for the scavengers. Cade, in a panic, tells Delilah to start the Mynock ASAP. She tries to argue, but Sin tells her that the odds are better with the engines than they are with the Sith. He remotely starts the ship and very creepily pulls a trail. Gross, dude. She tries to force herself free, but Cade tells her that unless she knows how to use a lightsaber or the Force, she will just be getting in the way. Running toward the battlefield, he tells Sin to get the shields up and running. As Cade speeds in the battle, Wolf and the Sith Lord that took his right arm are in a hate-filled duel. Nihil tells Wolf that he should have just stayed dead when he killed him on Ossus. He hates having to kill his opponents twice. Wolf, fighting back the Sith Lord, tells him that maybe the Force brought him back for the sole purpose of breaking the Sith hold on the galaxy. Staring into the burning field, Cade remembers seeing his master being fatally wounded. As Cade stands deep in his own memory, he sees TIE fighters flying above the temple grounds on Ossus. Cade asks Shadow where his master is. Without answering, Shadow tells him that they have to get the younglings to a shuttle to flee. They are quickly surrounded by Sith with their crimson blades and their tattooed skin. They are cut off. Shadow, in a moment of bravery, tells Cade to cut a new opening. Back on the battlefield, Marasiah is yelling at Antares. He has gotten them both killed by coming here. Defiantly, he says, "Not by these three idiots." She knows that her father didn't send him, and Master Krieg actually spills the beans and says that her father actually forbade it. The princess tells Antares that he better hope that the Sith kill him before her father is able to enact the Emperor's justice on him. Totally out of left field for the reader, Draco confesses that he was thinking about the one person that matters more to him than his own vows or his loyalty to the Empire. He was thinking of her, and not only that, he's also in love with her. Just like her long-lost ancestor Han Solo, she simply says, "I know." Back on the Minok, Delilah and Sin have the engines back up and running. Sin tells her to punch it and to get them out of there. Delilah tells Sin that they are not going to leave without Cade. Sin tries to rationalize with her. This war is between the Imperials, the Jedi, and the Sith. It isn't their fight, and that if Cade was one of them, he would be on the ship with them. Sin says that Cade made his choice, and that he is getting them out of there. Astrael interjects. The crew is forgetting about the princess. Delilah says forget about the princess. If Sin leaves Cade behind, she's going to kill him in his sleep. Cade, still in shock, seeing the destruction of the Sith with his own eyes for the first time in 7 years, is distracted, and a Sith closes in on him. Marasiah shouts to warn him, running to his aid before the Sith is able to strike him down, kicking him out of the way just in time. After a short duel, the Zabrak is able to deal a death blow on the princess before she is able to strike him down. As she falls to the ground, Cade rushes to her side. As the princess lays dying under the twin moons of Vendaxa, Cade sees the Temple of Ossus burning, as his father is surrounded by Sith. His final words to his son, "We take what is given." As Cade lays Marasiah down, he gently asks her why. Why did she do this? She tells him that she had to make it right, even if it only means saving one life. It is her duty. In this pivotal moment, Cade is blinded by his hate and his anger. Reaching out to Marasiah's lightsaber, he does something he swore he would never do again. Igniting the blade, Cade is ready to fight. Thus concludes issue 6 of Star Wars Legacy. As I've told you guys a million times before, this series just ramps it up, cranks it to 11 and rips the knob off. This is what the series has been building towards since it started, forcing Cade to finally take action and to accept his Jedi heritage. He isn't quite there yet, but his hatred for the Sith has forced him to wield the weapon of the Jedi once again. We also get to see the confrontation between Darth Nihil and Wolf, the clashing of two ideologies, and Cade is forced to come face to face with the man that took the life of his father. We also get the insurrection of the Imperial Knight Draco, running off to literally save the princess and confessing his love. One of the really odd things about this series is that everyone delivers tons of exposition while they're in the middle of heated battles. Also, a rambly side note, how sick is the Emperor's Imperial Knight's armor? So this week we leap right into the action. Cade rushes into battle carrying Marasiah's lightsaber. Nihil, his father's murderer, tells him that picking up a fallen lightsaber does not make him a Jedi. Depressingly, Nihil doesn't even really realize who Cade is and why he hates him so much. Nihil has constantly inhabited a portion of Cade's thoughts, and Nihil couldn't care less about who he is. Despite this, Talon can feel the Force blazing inside Cade, warning Nihil to be careful. Cade tells the Imperial Hand that he was trained on Ossus and he watched Nihil kill his father. Nihil remarks that he's killed a lot of dads, he must be more specific. I guess that's why my dad never came back from picking up those cigarettes. Then, idiotically, Cade tells all of the Sith present that his father was Jedi Master Cole Skywalker, revealing that he is also a living Skywalker. What a dipshit. Nihil is clearly taken aback by this. I mean, look at his shocked little face. He tells Cade that vengefulness is not the Jedi way, while swiping at Cade with his saber staff. Seriously, his staff and all of the Sith lightsabers in this series are super dope looking. I like how they're all uniform, but they all kind of look Vong-like in appearance. Cade tells Nihil that he's actually a pretty nasty Jedi, carrying so much hate in his heart for the Sith for 7 years. Wolf, coming to fight alongside his former Padawan, tells him that he cannot defeat the Sith with anger. That is a Sith weapon, and it will only pull at his heart, taking him deeper into the hate until it consumes him. Cade is still blinded by his seething hatred of the Sith. Meanwhile, Shadow is dueling with Darth Talon. He tells her that her mission has failed, and Marasiah is dead. Weird flex, but okay. Talon tells him regardless, she will serve her purpose. With all of them dead, Roan Fel will never know that his daughter was actually slain, and she will still entice him out of hiding. He tells her that her plan has a flaw. She assumes that she can kill him. Then they continue to have fight, and then across the battlefield, Draco is standing over Marasiah's body and tells the Sith They will not touch her. One of the Sith asks him who they are to deny them anything. And then, once again, someone just shouts out their title and full name with woeful abandon. He is Gander Krieg, Knight of the Empire, and the Sith betrayed the one true Emperor, and he will have his revenge. Jesus, man, you might as well just give him a business card with your blood type on it. He will leave nothing but bones for the beast to crack. Solid line. Draco is holding onto Marasiah's body and asks her why she would sacrifice herself for the likes of Cade Skywalker. She then whispers Draco's name. He is obviously ecstatic and shouts out that the princess is still alive. Rushing to the ship, Wolf tells the knight that he will cover his escape. As Draco flees with Marasiah, Wolf calls to Cade, who is still neck deep in his battle with Nihil. He tells Cade that Nihil is too much for him and that he can't take him all by himself. This isn't Ossus, and Cade isn't running. This time he will stay and fight off the Sith as long as he can. Darth Nihil tells Cade to listen to the Jedi Master's advice. He is no match for Nihil, but he will grant him the mercy of a quick death if he lays down and takes it just like his father did. Sexual innuendos. In a real case of my dad can beat up your dad, Cade tells Nihil that it wasn't an easy death. It took a dozen Sith Lords to take his father down. Nihil destroyed his life and took everything he ever loved from him. He will kill Nihil. On a quick tangent, Nihil is probably my favorite member of the One Sith Order, and probably one of the standout characters for the entire series. He is also one of the few Sith to be chosen to join the Order that was not born into their school of thought. He was so powerful in the Force as a warlord on Nagi that he was recruited to join the One Sith. Despite the One Sith being very xenophobic of outsiders, he was still quickly promoted to the position of the Emperor's hand. Tangent over. Back on the Minox, Sin and the crew are alerted. They have wounded. Draco and Wolf make it on board and quickly place the princess on a medical bed. Wolf, knowing that the princess is safe, wants to rush back out to help Cade. Draco, not being able to assess the situation, tells the Jedi that he swore an oath to the Emperor and to her to protect the royal family. Wolf is like, cool, well, I didn't do that, so bye-bye now. Besides that, why should he care about the Emperor when he was the man responsible for the massacre of Ossus? Why should he help the Empire that destroyed the Jedi Order? Draco reveals the massacre was carried out against his explicit orders. Imperial or not, he asks if her life matters at all to Wolf. Being a dutiful Jedi, he tells the Imperial Knight that he will do what he can to save her from death. He tells Draco to go and protect the ship so Cade and the gang can make it back safely. Outside the Minoc, Cade is still in his fiery duel with Darth Nihil, but a blaster bolt hits Nihil right in the chest. Sin still came to the aid of his longtime friend, despite his horrible prejudices. Cade asks Sin if he changed his mind about Jedi. Sin tells him not to get it twisted. He may hate the Jedi, but the Sith are clearly the bad guys. I mean, come on, they all have tattoos all over their face and are wearing black clothing. They look like they're out the crow. Cade tells Sin not to worry. He still knows that Sin hates all Force users equally, but you should never shoot a Sith if you aren't sure that he will die. Sin would have killed him if he would have stopped dancing for just a second. Darth Nihil force pushes Sin and tells him that he will take one fool at a time. Cade swipes at Darth Nihil, and Darth Nihil does an epic backflip to avoid the death blow. But before Nihil can land on his own 2 feet, Cade gives him a taste of the good old-fashioned boot. Darth Nihil falls down a mountain, the Hound style, never to be seen again. I'm just kidding, he comes back pretty quickly. Cade tells Sin to stop messing around, telling him to calm to Delilah to have her fire up the engines. They're getting off this backwater planet. Sin admits that he's been trying to leave the moment Cade stepped off the ship. Cade knows that Delilah is literally too dumb to realize that Cade is bad news. Shadow decides to take a break from his intense duel with Darth Talon to talk some shit on Cade and tell him that he doesn't have the skills to fight alongside him. Cade decides to throw some of his own shade, telling Shadow to either finish her off or marry her. Talon throws some force lightning at the crew and Shadow deflects it. They leap onto the Minox ramp. Talon tries to leap on board to continue the fight with multiple force users, which is a questionable decision at best. Draco, still angered that Marasiah was nearly killed off by the Sith, pushes Talon from the ramp down to the cold hard ground below. Talon, knowing that she has fully failed, panics and tells Nihil to scramble the ships and to give chase to the fleeing Minoc. Nihil knows that this is a useless effort. By the time they get to their ships, the Minoc will already be in hyperspace. And in this universe, there's no such thing as hyperspace tracking. There is nothing left for her to do but to report her feelings to Darth Krayt. Once she does, he is certain that Krayt will kill her, and he will once again be the one and only hand of the Sith Emperor. Back in the Minoc, Cade asks if the ship is ready to leap into hyperspace. Delilah asks if she has ever let Cade down. Draco is desperate to save Marasiah's life. He implores the crew to set a course for Bastion. Sin is not down for this idea. He tells the Knight that they just escaped the Sith. Why would they go right back into Sith Imperial space? Draco tells him that the Sith no longer control Bastion. The one true Emperor has taken back their homeworld. It's the only safe place that they can go that has Bacta tanks and skilled healers to keep Marasiah alive. The best course is plotted, but it will take some time to get them there. They can only push the engine so far. Draco is full on desperate at this point. He knows that Marasiah only has a very limited amount of time left. He will do everything that he can to help the Jedi save the princess. Shouting instructions to the crew, he tells them to get every bit of speed they can out of this rust bucket. Ganner regretfully tells Draco that the Jedi are much more skilled and the princess is still dying. Draco is in a crazed state at this point. He tells his fellow knight that he can join the Jedi and he can help save her. It must work. Ganner tells him that it's useless at this point. There's nothing they can do to save her. Even though she's on the brink of death, death, she tells Draco not to fear her death. She isn't dying in fear. She tells Draco that the Jedi and the Imperials have to join forces if they are ever going to squash the threat of the one Sith. If he wants to restore the Empire to its former glory and restore their honor, he has to help right the wrongs they made. Amongst all of the chaos, Cade tells Draco that he can help her. Draco looks full-on insane at this point, shouting at Cade that he is the reason why she is dying in the first place. It doesn't matter that he is a Skywalker, he has to keep his filthy, grubby pirate hands off of her. Draco winds back and cold cocks Cade right in the teeth, sending him flying into some barrels. Draco, with some real classism, tells Cade to look at his life and to look at hers. She's of royal blood, a real fancy Lord Fauntleroy, and Cade is living in filth and is a drug addict. She gave her life for the greater good of the galaxy, while Cade ran away from his birthright as the de facto beacon of hope for the Jedi. What has he done with his life that is worth her sacrifice? Cade, clearly not realizing how to de-escalate a situation, pulls out his blaster and tells Draco that he said he would help. Nothing calms down a room like pulling out a gun during an argument. Both of the Imperial Knights ignite their lightsabers as Shadow ignites his. Shadow tells everyone that there is no reason for them to fight. Draco tells Shadow that he deludes himself if he thinks that he is any match for one Imperial Knight, let alone two. Shadow in that moment decides to start his very own Versus channel. That is an interesting theory. Astral is the voice of reason in the center of this macho testosterone-fueled debate, telling Draco that she understands how deeply he feels for the princess, but no amount of punching holes in Jedi faces will save the princess at this point. They have tried everything, and it won't hurt to let Cade have a whack at healing Marasiah. Wolf picks a very intense moment to ignite a Philosophy 101 class, and asks Cade if the Force wills it, who is he to bring her back to life? Cade, being the argumentative student that he is, asks what if the Force wills it that he saves her? Wolf knows the answer to this little train car question. He knows that Cade shouldn't, because he has to draw on the dark side to heal. That is imposing his will on the Force, not living by the will of the Force. He cannot live in the light if he is constantly pulling shadows around him. Would the princess want to be saved if Cade has to use the dark side to do it? Cade asks Wolf if he is listening. Marasiah is clearly the one they are looking for. She'll be the one to unite the Jedi and the Knights against the Sith and bring balance back to not only the Force, but to the galaxy. Who would everyone be more willing to follow? Cade, a loner with a drug problem, or a princess who is dutiful and kind? Wolf tells Cade there's no good reason why he should have to call on the dark side. He can be trained. There's no time for this. By the time he's trained, the princess will be 100% dead, along with all hope for a united galaxy. How does Wolf know that he isn't meant to take life back from death by touching the dark side? Does that make him as much of a monster as the Sith that they all hate so much? The Sith that wrought destruction and evil upon the galaxy? Will Wolf and Shadow strike him down for saving a life by using the dark side? Wolf tells Cade that he will not stop him. Maybe it is his destiny to heal through the dark side. However, just because he can doesn't mean that he should. Cade thinks of as more of a debt collection. He's paying back the princess for saving his life, and no one dies for Cade. Not again. But that being said, he goes to work. With all the crew and the Imperial Knights and the Jedi watching, he ignites Force Lightning, diving deep into the dark side of the Force. He brings Marasiah back from the brink of death, just as he did his master 7 years earlier. As Cade dives deeper and deeper into the dark side, Astral in amazement shouts, "The princess is alive!" Antares rushes to her. Like a dream, her death was fleeting, passing as quickly as it had come. Her wounds were almost healed. As the group looks on in disbelief, Cade slowly stumbles into the cargo hold. Wolf calls to him with no response. Wolf tries to comfort his former Padawan, telling him that he can sense how close he came to being devoured by the dark side. But despite all that, in this moment, it almost feels like he's not in the Force at all. It's like when he closed himself all those years ago in Ossus. He is totally gone in the Force, as if he took the princess's death into himself. Cade looks just like he did all those years ago, a frightened young Jedi, lost in something that he doesn't fully understand, in the fetal position. He tells Wolf to leave him alone, to never speak to him of this again. His eyes are crimson yellow, he is fully gone into the dark side, allowing himself to take in the death of another. The crew make it safely back to Bastion. The Empire welcomes the Minot crew with open arms, telling them they can stay as royal guests. Cade is sleepless, unable to rest after his brush with the dark side, but he has something on his mind, and that something is fleeing from his responsibilities once again. Leaving Delilah's bed, he has a backpack and he's ready to bail. Wolf knows his Padawan more than he knows himself. He waits for him by the landing pad and asks Cade what will become of his friends. Cade knows that Sin and Blue will get by just fine without him. Delilah held the Minot together even as they were fleeing from murderous Sith Lords, and he can no longer fully trust Sin now that he knows his heritage. If he leaves, it removes a burden from not only himself, but also from Sin and Delilah. Cade asks if Wolf and Shadow will take the Empire's offer for Haven and an alliance. Wolf tells Cade that despite the pleas of Astral, they have to refuse the Emperor's offer. Everything changed after Ossus. The Jedi can never go back to trusting the Empire after everything they had done to cull their ranks. And this is something that I actually find very, very interesting about this entire time period. So not only did the Empire defeat the Galactic Alliance and therefore the Jedi, they were also willing to basically extend an olive branch to them and to create a pact, a truce, something that the Empire of old would have never done. And despite all this, Roan Fel basically fell victim to the Moff Council. They chose to kill the Jedi against Roan Fel's wishes. But if the Sith had never come into play, there was always a chance the Empire and the Jedi probably could have gotten along, and the Jedi could have coexisted alongside the Imperial Knights. But Cade agrees, saying that Ossus changed everything for him as well. It isn't just Wolf there. Shadow is also there, waiting in the shadows. Pun not intended. He asked Cade if the repairs had been made to the ship. And say what you want about the Empire, they are efficient. Cade, in a gesture of kindness, asks the Jedi if they need a lift off-world. Since they have no intentions of taking the Empire's offer, they would be grateful for a lift. Cade tells them they shouldn't get any ideas of him rejoining the Jedi. This is his ship, and therefore his rules. Shadow, ever the shit-talker, asks Cade if he's a better pilot than the last time they saw one another. To be fair, the last time he saw him, his X-Wing did blow up. As they leave Imperial space, Cade tells Shadow that he's a funny Jedi, and people don't like funny Jedi. Shadow tells Cade that he isn't really sure that anyone really likes Jedi these days. Back on Coruscant, Talon makes her final approach to the Sith Imperial capital. Within the Sith temple, Krayt sits on his throne, ready to pass judgment on a willing Darth Talon. She is ready to die. Here we get a juicy little bit about Krayt. He tells Talon that even though she has failed, she still passed knowledge on to him. He is now aware there is yet another Skywalker. Not only does Cade live, but he is also very powerful in the Force. His Imperial snitch Russ has informed him that Roan has taken back Bastion. While this is unfortunate, he's also learned that Skywalker healed the princess's wounds, so he is indeed very powerful. Krayt questions if maybe he should have ended the Skywalker bloodline when he had the chance. Perhaps it was the will of the Force that he did not, alluding to Krayt's origins. And I'm assuming that most of you guys actually know Krayt's origins, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone who does not. But hint hint wink wink, I would go back and read some of the Clone Wars comics. Talon, desperate to get back on the good side of the Emperor, asks him if he wishes for her to end it now. Krayt tells her that instead of ending it, he wants her to bring the young wayward Jedi to him. He will be very useful to the Emperor, as her master wishes, as he always wishes. This week's issue is probably one of my absolute all-time favorites of the series. One of the more interesting aspects of this comic run is the state of the galaxy after the Vong War. After the big three are long gone, after the Jedi have completely re-established themselves as the guardians of democracy in the galaxy far, far away, probably one of the more fascinating aspects of this entire comic run to me is the complete and total, public rehabilitation of the Imperial remnant. They just call themselves the Empire, but you get it. In previous weeks, we've talked about the Empire's Victory Without War initiative, which sought to aid planets that had been devastated by the Vong War. After the end of the Galactic Civil War, obviously people were a bit peeved at the idea of the Empire coming back into major galactic politics. Jagged Fel, and presumably the mother of his children Jaina Solo, fan theory, also extremely obvious, used the Empire as a force for good, helping out marginalized populations and bringing back entire systems into the Empire without having to start an actual war. All of this is just to attest to how devastating it was when the Ossus project backfired. Seemingly, the Yuuzhan Vong had conquest back on the menu, and it was all the faults of the Jedi and the government that supported them. This shook the Galactic Alliance to its core. I don't think a lot of people really understand just how devastating the Yuuzhan Vong War was. I mean, I'm talking trillions of people were killed in what amounts to genocide. I mean, if you think about the Yuuzhan Vong, were a race, they were a species that were actively killing off large swaths of populations in the galaxy, or enslaving them, so literally just committing galactic-wide genocide. So obviously a lot of people in the galaxy were not very hot on the idea of the Yuuzhan Vong being rehabilitated and brought back into the galactic fold. If the people were considering leaving the Galactic Alliance before for the Empire, their minds had certainly been made up now. With that one spark of hate and fear came war, and quickly shifting alliances. This week's issue picks up right at the end of that conflict, days before the Massacre of Ossus. In the Imperial War Room, Roan Fel, the Emperor, and Moff Nina Calixte oversee the Battle of Kamas, the most pivotal battle in the Sith Imperial War. As the battle rages on, Moff Calixte feigns surprise as Emperor Fel asks if she's pleased with her war. Here's where we learn about the big lie told to the galaxy and Imperial citizens. Roan uncovered all too late the real reason for the war. It was all orchestrated by not only the Sith, but Moff Calixte, Moff Veed, and the Moff Council. Fel admits that it was not only the Empire, but also the Galactic Alliance that defeated the Yuuzhan Vong. He deduces that it was in fact always a plan to sabotage the Ossus Project with the help of the Sith. Many on the High Moff Council called the project an act of war and issued an ultimatum: either end the Ossus Project or risk all-out war. The GA and the Jedi gave them a resounding F off, kicking off a galaxy-spanning conflict. The Yuuzhan Vong were in fact framed, just as the Jedi and the Galactic Alliance had assumed all along. Moff Veed was a little too thirsty over the idea of an all-out war and was ready to manipulate the Empire into mass-scale conflict. Obviously, the one Sith had reached out to Calixte first. I mean, just look at the smug look on her face. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Instead of bringing the Sith's offer to the head honcho, the big cheese, the Emperor himself, she brought it to her lover, Moralish Veed. The Sith waited in the shadows, pulling the strings of the war machine of the Empire, and waited until the conflict was in full force to offer their allegiance. A dark to balance at the light, the Sith versus the Jedi. Galactic Alliance had the foresight and the abilities of the Jedi, and now the Empire had the Sith, which Calixte had manipulated the Empire and maneuvered things to make it so they really had no choice but to accept. She had betrayed her Emperor in a real King's Landing move. Her first loyalty was supposed to be to her Emperor, but she rebukes that sentiment. Her loyalty was always to the Empire first, and obviously Roan disagrees with that. She's only been faithful to herself this entire time. She tells Roan that his only real concern was that someone would betray him and replace him on the throne, but I mean, if you think about it, was he really wrong? I mean, he's literally being stabbed in the back as we speak. In anger, Roan tells her that this is his empire, and that she has committed treason. Calixte is simply saying and doing what all the Moffs are thinking, and that she has some very powerful allies with the Sith. Roan, however, knows they can't be trusted. I mean, just look at their history. I mean, come on. They will simply use her and the rest of the Moff Council until their plans have come to fruition. Then they will all die once they are no longer useful. To her credit, she has thought all of this through. The Sith will need the Empire for its military might, and they will need the bones of the Galactic Alliance for its bureaucracy to run the political arm of the galaxy. They will always need her. But why would the Sith need an Emperor who never embraced them in the first place? Masterclass. Not only that, but if he strikes her down now in their moment of victory, is he really all that different from the Sith that he hates so much? Before Fel is really able to weigh his options, Grand Admiral Moralish Veed appears on the holocom. The war has been won, and to prevent further loss of life, the Empire has accepted the surrender of the Galactic Alliance. The war is over. Not only that, the crown jewel of the Galactic Alliance, Coruscant, can no longer be militarily defended. However, there is still the matter of the Jedi. Certainly, the Jedi will never submit to an Empire, especially one that's in the league with the one Sith. Calixte doesn't seem bothered. The Jedi will have no choice. Fel tells her that she doesn't understand the Jedi. They have been destroyed by the Empire before, and he will not allow it to happen again. He orders that they be allowed to leave the Jedi Temple on Coruscant and take refuge on the ancient Jedi planet of Ossus. Ultimately, and unfortunately for them, we know their fate will remain the same regardless. While many Jedi died on the ancient world of Ossus, many survived. Look, out of all the Jedi purges, this one has to be the most poorly executed. A lot of the Sith Imperial strategy was just the hope that the Jedi would be broken enough that they really couldn't muster much of a meaningful resistance, but this Jedi purge was nowhere near as effective as Order 66, with them estimating that roughly half of the Jedi survived.
I pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
The Sith got too eager and barely waited for most of the Jedi to arrive at Ossus, as a lot of them were scattered throughout the galaxy fighting the war. The Empire really had the upper hand in this entire situation. With an iron fist rule over galactic politics and the one Sith as the dominant Force sect, they were primed to take out all of the Jedi in one stroke. Darth Maladi did not see it that way. The war was long and brutal with mass casualties on both sides. If all the Jedi had been in Ossus, they would have been more difficult to defeat. Shattered and without leadership from Grandmaster Cole Skywalker, they would have to go into hiding, which would give the one Sith more time to prepare. Calixte knew that this was going to be the least of their problems. The current Emperor was not going to be happy with the massacre. Officially, this was supposed to be a diplomatic mission to try and convince the Jedi to join the Empire, which may have been the dumbest excuse ever conceived. Who in their right mind would think that the Jedi would join a fascist state with the Sith as their main religion? Now here's where we see a really interesting growing divide in the New Order. None of the Moff Council was consulted before the massacre and the assault on Ossus, a total surprise to both them and the Emperor. Now this is where the grand plan comes in. All of the Moffs agreed that Roan Fel would need to be replaced by someone new. He was never in full support of the Sith Imperial War with the Jedi and the GA. Worse, he knew it was all based on a big lie. If it wasn't obvious that he didn't trust the Sith in the first place, the fact that he had barred his Imperial Knights from even fighting in the war proved it. Maladi informed Veed and Calixte that it would be in their best interest to feign surprise. The Sith would be attending the Moff Council. Soon there would be someone new on the throne. Moralish believes that he is going to sit on the throne, just as they had always planned. Calixte, however, is furious. She wasn't informed about the attack on Ossus beforehand. Even Moralish didn't tell her, despite the fact that they are partners. He agrees. She is his partner, and a formidable one at that, and he is exceptionally lucky that she never wanted to be on the Imperial throne herself. Now, Calixte is a very smart woman. She knows that the true power is in the lies and the deception she uses. The power is behind the throne. Why be so out in the open and exposed when you can pull all of the strings from behind? Finally, she confesses, the Sith really make her uncomfortable. I wonder why a bunch of death cultists from an ancient religion would make her uncomfortable. Moralish rightfully calls out the hypocrisy of the situation, telling her that it's a little late to back out on this plan now. Calixte states the obvious. Maladi never actually said that it would be Moralish who sat in the throne once Fel was overthrown. Moralish, being very pompous and up his own ass, says that none on the Moff Council are qualified to lead the Empire. Who else could there be? Darth Cade intensifies. Maladi knows that if they chose someone else, the Moff Council would just depose them. The Sith need them. Calixte, ever the optimist, skeptically responds, they need us thus far. Moralish Veed is more of like a glass half full of blue milk guy, insists that this is a big victory for them. The following day in the private chambers of the current Emperor Roan Fel, he meets with his very competent and very Force-sensitive Imperial Knights. Morgan Fel cautions his cousin that he's playing a risky game of sabacc with this planned meeting. Roan dismisses the cautious attitude of his cousin. He knows the Moff Council and the hardliners of the Empire as well. They want order, and who better to give them order than the true Emperor? They may have scoffed at Roan's victory without war initiative, but they would never stand for outright disobedience. The Empire still loved their traditions. At this point, the Sith were way too entrenched with the Empire, and there was no feasible way to divest them from each other now. However, they could still kill Veed if he made any suspicious moves, and they could also kill Calixte while they're at it. Shockingly, in a room full of fully trained Imperial Knights, they didn't sense a woman standing behind a curtain. A regular old curtain. Maybe the curtain was made out of Yislamari blood or something. To their credit, the Knights are quick on the draw, and before she can blink an eye, she's off the ground and making friends with the closest wall. Roan laments the fact that he didn't kill her when he had the chance, and that may have been a mistake. Arrogantly, she says that killing her now would be an even bigger mistake. Morgan shouts that she may have overheard their plans. Dude, she was behind a curtain in the same room. Of course she heard your plans. With her eyes and ears everywhere, she admits that she already knew their plan was to arrest Veed, and even worse, she knows of a plot to kill the Emperor. Draco doesn't trust her at face value. She could be making up the entire plot just to save her life. Fel, having a cooler head, tells Draco that she would have been in zero danger if she hadn't come here in the first place. As she gets back to her feet, she divulges the Sith's plot to destroy the Jedi. The Emperor. The Sith plan to crash the Moff Council and to assassinate Roan Fel. She doesn't know how many of them are coming, she just knows that their only hope of survival is to escape. Fel is understandably suspicious. She was just rubbing in his face that she had facilitated the deal with the Sith, and there was nothing he could do about it. Fel assumed that Moralish Veed would be named the new Emperor, and the last thing that Veed and Calixte would want is for the actual Emperor to be out roaming the galaxy. Unless the obvious happens. They are going to name Cade the new Emperor, and by extension, Veed and herself would be a liability, not an asset. Cade would never be able to crush the entire galaxy under his heel if a large portion of it was still loyal to the true Emperor. Her only hope is to fracture the Imperial might and to create a demand for their services in the New Order. His survival was the best insurance plan for everyone involved, and that was enough to make them fast friends. Roan knew that unfortunately, they would be expecting a contingent of Imperial Knights to attend the meeting along with the Emperor. That meant that his cousin would need to accompany a body double to the meeting to curb any suspicions. Morgan, being very boastful, has always wanted to test his skills against a true Sith Lord. Roan, with a pat on the shoulder, warns him not to underestimate them. With that, Calixte takes her leave, telling the group that a shuttle waits for them in the lower levels. If they take the maintenance tunnels from the Senate chambers, they should be able to make it there safely. Roan, showing his good nature, warns Calixte that the Sith will know that he has escaped. It can only be because someone with knowledge of the assassination plot warned him. Stoically, she tells him that if the plan fails, she's dead anyways. Regardless, she's had luck in the past shielding her true nature from Force users. Obviously, if she brings that curtain, everything should be just fine. Next, we cut back to a familiar scene, one that we've seen before but with added context, as the Moff Council and the Emperor's body double hold a meeting to discuss the end of the war. To maintain peace and stability, the Empire will keep the Galactic Alliance bureaucracy in place for the time being. Most importantly, the Jedi Order has been broken. The remaining Jedi have been scattered throughout the galaxy, leaving them with no central leadership and no safe haven. Pretending to be surprised, Veed announces the intrusion of the One Sith, being led by none other than the elusive Darth Krayt. In the Undercity, the true Emperor and Draco are fleeing to their shuttle. Atari's ever the romantic asks, what about Marasiah? She will meet them on Bastion, the most highly secured planet in the Empire, once they've made it free of Coruscant space. Now this is actually an ironically hilarious moment for me. As we see Roan and Antares fighting their own battle, we see the Emperor's cousin get absolutely bodied by Krayt. Like, he barely even tries. After my man talked all that shit, they really did him like that. It makes you wonder, is Krayt that good or are Imperial Knights just that bad? But just then, Roan and Draco feel in the Force all the Imperial Knights, including Morgan, are dead. They serve their purpose for a higher cause. In true Imperial fashion, Roan doesn't miss a beat and is back on the run. Back in the throne room, the obvious happens. Krayt declares himself the Emperor, the galaxy is broken, just coming out of a massive war. But to be fair, when isn't it? It needs a man of vision, a strong Emperor like Krayt. Calixte's worst nightmare has come to fruition. She's in danger. Massive amounts of danger. And danger finds her quicker than she may have anticipated, as Darth Maladi catches her off guard in her own living quarters. The Sith saw right through the act, and even worse for Moff Calixte, they sensed her treachery. I guess she didn't bring that curtain with her. Now, for those of you who aren't super well versed in the lore of the post-Endor legends, things got pretty wild after the collapse of the Empire. Various Moffs became warlords of huge sections of space, all fighting over who was actually in charge, or fighting with planetary defense forces. It took years for the New Republic to bring order back to the galaxy in the first place. Now Darth Maladi, very smart cookie, is fully aware of that, and the Sith by their very nature are very small in number. Sure, they may be Legion by comparison to former Sith sects, but there is no way they could run the galaxy without the Moff Council. They would need to avoid another post-Endor Imperial Civil War situation. Calixte has masterfully outplayed the One Sith in this situation. With Fel on the loose, large chunks of the Imperial military will still be loyal to the true Empire. Even worse, some Moffs may change their tone on who they are backing for the throne. Maladi wonders aloud, if she were to dissect Calixte's brain, would she learn the truth? Calixte insists that the two of them are better off as allies since their interests, for the moment, align. Maladi squashes that train of thought. This really signifies the changing ideology among the Empire. Before, it was all about political power and backstabbing to reach the upper echelons of Imperial society. Now, it is all about your value to the One Sith and their very extreme beliefs. If you serve no greater purpose for Krayt or his whims, you will be discarded. Dark times, indeed. With that, Moff Calixte mutters under her breath, the downfall of the One Sith will be their arrogance. They are no different from Sidious, and that will be the knife that kills them.